Excellent. So next up, as part of the YPPN, we have a fantastic member spotlight presentation on the team at Project Rockit, that have recently launched their In Real Life platform, series of youth-generated videos that center the voice of young people in the conversation around online safety, negotiating online relationships, understanding their rights, responsibilities, and how to make the most of the online world. We're very lucky to have Dan, who's part of the YPPN, here today, and the team that helped, some of the team who helped to create and drive the project. So we have Yuka, we have Jess, and we have Sunaina. So what I'm going to do is pass over to them. They're going to host a bit of a conversation around the approach that they took, some of their learnings, some great reflections, and then they're going to open it up to questions. And so I will turn my video off. I'll hand over to you all. A massive thank you for making it along today, and really looking forward to hearing about how you got to where you got to.
Thank you, Sam. Really much appreciated. My job here probably is to do a little bit of a setup and then get out of the way and let the rest of the team sort of respond to some questions and things that we've prepared. So there's no slides. The reason for that is that we've just found over the course of last year doing this project, there's such value in just conversation. And we did it just like this, you know, on Zoom with young people across the country, talking about their experiences. But what I thought I would do, like it's a video project, but the problem is every time we try and share videos online, it's doesn't work. So we're not going to try and do that. But what I wanted to do was just give you a sense. I'm sharing my screen now, just to give you a sense of what in real life is. So it's the whole process, right? But at the end, the outcome has been this website, and it's a video library, and it's freely available. And the intention is that it would be for schools. Each one of these videos is as young people talking about issues that matter to them, their actual experience of what it is to be online and what that looks like. And they're in a number of different formats. We have some people just doing sort of like these impassioned sort of solo monologues to the camera. We have others where groups of people are talking about issues. We have conversations where young people sort of talked back and forth to each other through video chat. And we provided a pretty sort of modular approach in the sense that we've also provided a bit of a handbook which offers a whole range of sort of options for how you may use these videos and what they may look like in a learning environment. Now that could be a classroom, but it could be a whole range of other things. So everyone here, I'd encourage you to check it out. I'm glad that Sam's already put that in the chat. So that's what in real life is, but ultimately this is a participation network. So we're really proud of just how authentic and how we got to a place that actually allowed the team and the young people involved to get to something else, to get to something that I think really does represent young people's experience and views on online safety education. And as a result, we've got something very different. So I have a massive document that I'm working on. So if anyone is interested after this in getting access to sort of like the philosophy and the methodology and what we sort of think about this, you can ping me with that. We don't need slides. You can ping me and I'll find a way to share that with everyone and make sure that people have got access to that. But in the meantime, you've been introduced to Yuka and Sunny and Jess, and I'm not sure who wants to start, but I am, really interested in the fact that, what do you think we did in real life that helped ensure that yourselves and your peers were able to be authentic and produce these videos that were probably different? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on that one.
I can jump in and say that I think a lot of it was the environment that was created. It was very much a judgment-free zone. And it just comes from the fact that everybody was kind of dealing with the same things but different. It's individual experiences, but it was focusing on something so vague, which is how the internet affects us, that it was something that brought us all together. And I think having such a vague but important concept really allowed for people's ideas to flourish and for things that they might not have otherwise shared to come forwards.
Yeah, that's great. Do you agree with that? Is that your experience?
I think also, it's getting like people like yourself and the other, adults who are kind of in charge of the project, always repeating back to the person who said something, what they think they heard, or what they understood from whatever they shared. So then, if it has been misinterpreted, they always are given a chance to explain themselves further, or use different terms. So I think it allowed us to be able to express ourselves in ways for not only like ourselves to understand, but so different types of people, generations can understand as well. So it really helps.
I love how you describe that, because to me, on one of the parts of my practice, or parts of the practice, I think in participation, it's so important is curiosity. And that sort of speaks to that. It's that ability to say, I have no idea. And to be curious allows, you and the team the space to explore that. Sunny, what about you? Came on a bit later on in the project so that people have a sense of it. We sort of had a creative advisors group of a smaller group of 6 people that sort of came through the project. And then we had research participants that were part of a research team. And Sneha, who was in the meeting, may not be here, was one of the facilitators of that research project. And then we had content creators who were the ones who created all the videos, and you came on at that stage. What was your experience like of that? How did you find that?
Well, it was, for me personally, I thought it was very comfortable because it wasn't like I just made the videos and sent it to you and then they like disappeared forever. Like everything, we were let in the loop with everything. Like we knew when you were editing, and we kind of, well, we had this veto power, which helped us feel in control. At least for me, like I felt a little bit in control because I was like, if I didn't want something I said in the final product, it wasn't there. And that just helped so much because it's not like I said something and it's out there forever. And, every step of the way you would say, are you happy with this, or is there something you'd like to change? And we could also provide our feedback, coming from, like, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I use the internet religiously, like I'm on it all the time. So knowing that like we could also provide our input from a different perspective of internet users, I think, of how we perceived how we thought that the website would end up, I think that really also helped, make me really comfortable.
Yeah. And any of you, and maybe, Jess, you could start again, but I'm happy for anyone to jump in. Like, what do you think best helped in the process to generate your ideas and make decisions and have that sort of control element over this? You think?
I can say that there was a halfway amount of guidance and a halfway amount of getting to control. We didn't have to figure out everything on our own. We weren't just thrown a singular question for the whole session and told to make a whole conversation or fix the problem. We were given guidance throughout sessions, and if there were certain questions that nobody had answers for, we weren't pressured to just come up with those answers. It was, okay, well, what about this question? Or how can we reframe it so that it's actually applicable to you? It was the understanding that not everything that we thought was going to be applicable to people would be, I think.
That's really, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I also produce videos and especially with people with the lived experiences. And what I found was useful for them is to involve them in the process of creating the content so they can get quite excited when they are genuinely interested in the creative process. I think a certain level of exploration process with them would be working, but also sometimes it depends on their time commitment as well. Some young people, they are quite busy working on multiple things. So from that, a clear guidance and a clear even dot points, what they need to think about could really helpful as well in terms of reducing their time stress if they need to manage their time at work, different things. And to make it, yeah, a certain control, I think maybe that's also quite useful in the very, very beginning, saying, you know, things be respectful or, you know, make sure it's inclusive, not abusive, something like that, just as kind of like a code of conduct or agreement sort of thing. Yeah, so just put them in, put it in their mind first. That's what I found useful.
Okay, you've captured really well what we sort of, a number of different approaches we took in that. I think I'm really obsessed with, you know, Roger Hart. That's old school, probably is probably the first little thing that I ever saw. So I'm still obsessed with it, but Roger Hart's ladder of participation, and that top rung is about young people initiated, adult supported. And I think that, you know, what Jess was speaking to, you know, really was that. Yuka, I was wondering if you wanted to talk about sort of like the dynamic in the team. What do you think that you know, the team started using the term vibe a bit, it even appears in the videos, but what do you think the vibe was that helped us to foster collaboration and get these great videos?
The vibe was really casual. We had lots of WhatsApp group chats, and even though I joined later, I could definitely see that it was a very casual vibe. You know, if someone had questions, we could ask, and it just felt like a classroom setting where people just shout out questions and someone else answers it. Like, it was very informal, but not in the way that you didn't feel like you didn't have support.
And Yuka, you're nodding.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree there. Can you hear me better now? Is it better? Okay. I think, yeah, like the casual setting was nice, and I think there were little groups as well that got along well with each other, and knew how to bring out, you know, different information from each other, just, you know, depending on how they talk. Like how some people had videos like together, like Sunny and I, or that one where they had like the conversation back and forth. Yeah, and I think, you know, as a whole team, everyone kind of was able to get along with each other and, you know, have those same conversations together. But also, I think there were some smaller, stronger connections that people already had or people grew throughout the project.
I feel like you're talking about a couple of things there. It's sort of like that principle I was really working on, elevating diversity, you know, recognizing that young people aren't a homogenous group and that they don't all have the same views either. And that's sort of beautifully represented in some of the ways that those conversations happened. We had different people sharing their opinions that they didn't necessarily agree on. And for us, that was important because it means that the final product means that a whole bunch of different young people will see themselves in there or their perspectives in there. And it's not just about, you know, seeing themselves in terms of, you know, what they look like, but also all the different things they say and how they exist in the world. I can see that our CEO, Lucy Thomas, has got her hand raised and you must be itching to jump in and say something. So give us your spiel.
I wanted to jump in and firstly say thank you so much for having us to share some of these kind of musings and learnings, and also to bring a little bit of structure to the conversation. You can probably tell, jump straight into the kind process. But I think the context is also really helpful to share as to how we kind of set up these conversations. I might spark some more questions as well. So there were kind of two phases to this project, which was funded by the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner. For the first phase, we teamed up with a research team at Young and Resilient, a fantastic research team at Western Sydney Uni that really get youth participation and that don't perform the kind of research that treats young people as subjects, but actually treats young people as co-researchers as well. So that was a really important enabler for us, that young people are actually shaping the research. And Dan referenced this, but Sneha joined us as one of the facilitators guiding young people through these participatory roundtables. That research, and I'll drop the link to it in the chat, but it actually surfaced that online safety education, this won't be a surprise to people in the group, but is just bloody irrelevant for young people. And in fact, centres extreme risks like predators and cyberbullying and hate and trolling and very important, but young people were repeatedly saying that what they need help with is the more everyday challenges like working out online friendships and navigating consent and boundaries and effective communication, that kind of thing. And so the next phase was actually elevating young people to be the engineers and the architects of these stories and education. And that's what you can probably see, like often, youth consultation is a box tick that happens at the start or at the very end. And for us, the real strength of this project has been embedding young people's voices throughout. And in fact, when we applied to the eSafety Office for funding for this project, the project that we applied for is vastly different from what we ended up delivering, because we actually trusted the voices of young people in designing what they wanted it to be. So what you see as a result is Jess's awesome flag background narrating the strengths and challenges of being part of beautiful online communities. You see Yuka's incredible close-up sassy commentary on why it's not her responsibility to educate people on social issues online, right through to pulling in Sunny, who delivers these beautiful, at times vulnerable, really sincere monologues about the impacts of online harm and how I guess it's a really strong lived experience case that's made possible by actually centering young people throughout. So I guess that's all I wanted to add. The result that you can see is the platform, but really there's been a narrative, a through line of young people's voices and leadership the whole way throughout, led by Dan as kind of the custodian of the project as well.
Thanks, Luz. And I think what we're trying to, by talking with the team, is here is to get to unpick for all of you who all probably have some level of engagement, participation, what that means. So I'm trying to look at the time, but I'm just wondering, maybe it's a point, folks, where Jess, Sunny, Yuka, you want to, what advice would you give? Like, what was the highlight for you in terms of being involved? These people that are here listening to you are interested in, what is it that we need to do to best support young people, to have them engaged and be a part of something? What do you think are some of the things that we did in real life that worked, and what are sort of you would recommend to others?
Like I said before, I think it was just being part of the creative process. So we didn't feel like we were just there creating your content like little guinea pigs. Like, we were actually a part of it. We got to actually see what goes on behind the scenes. And I think that was really important, to feel a part of this. Instead of it being like a us versus them, it was a togetherness. And I think that was really important.
On another point is the time. Like, if you missed a meeting or you weren't able to make certain deadlines, for example, like you couldn't make one particular video, nobody was going to shame you for that. And there wasn't that heavy expectation to do it. It wasn't treated like homework. It was treated like, if you can do it, that's great. And if you can't, nobody's going to hate you for it, or you're not going to get a bad grade. It didn't have that pressure on it, which I really did appreciate.
I agree on both those points. There wasn't much pressure, and it was a very safe and kind environment. As for advice, I think talking to people as well, like in a community like that, was very very uplifting, and it felt very safe, and I feel like you could learn a lot and also share a lot of opinions when you're in such a safe place like that.
And I think all of those things speak to the fact that, you know, we use buzz terms like human-centered, co-design, all that sort of stuff a lot, but I've really been unpacking and trying through this process, which I felt has been a really strong one, to understand what that means. And I think Fei mentioned time, but, you know, and we just mentioned it then too with Jess, but I think the project had to change its relationship with time. So often we are driven, and we still have to be at times, by, you know, organizational policies, or, you know, everyone stops work at this time, or we're not offering time in lieu, or there's, you know, a funding agreement says that it has to be done by then, or we wrote that in the goals to start with, so therefore it has to be in the end. And as soon as you start to allow an institution or a policy document or a strategic plan to start to guide things, you move away from being human-centered and focused on the young people. And so you actually have to advocate for their needs, and their needs are around, and the needs of the team are around time and around, you know, I think that helps possibly with what you were saying, keeping people safe. And the other thing that sort of, I think within what you were talking about too, is that agency offers safety, right? But agency is only good if you can get out of the way. You know, we always talk about offering young people agency, but what that actually means is they have decision-making power. So we had to work on ways to find ways to go, well, let them create the content, let them make the decision. So therefore we won't. And, you know, that was, I think that's one of the key things, is to think about, am I actually focused on the needs of the young people here rather than the needs of the project even? So I think we were worried a bit less about getting it right, but I'm wondering if, you know, if any of you had a reflection on what some of the challenges were, or what was difficult. You know, were there times still where you're sort of like, oh, actually, we're not being listened to, or there's stuff going on?
No. Really?
Always knowing, Sonny, that criticism is the harder piece. Jess, have you got any reflections on it?
The only thing I found difficult was setting up the camera equipment, because I had no clue how to do it. Other than that, we felt, I think that I speak for the group using we, but I personally felt listened to the whole time. And I don't think there was a point where I thought of Project Rockit or the IRL group negatively at all. It was always like a positive. If I saw a group message in the group chat, I'd be like, heck yeah, I want to go check that, instead of, oh no, I've got work to do. It was always positive.
Do you want to talk then, Jess, about some of those practices? Like, you're a creative advisor, so you were there for quite a long part of the project, just talking about the different ways we would connect with each other.
So meeting as in during the meetings?
Yeah, I think so, during the meetings, or even maybe talk about the meetings, but then also the sort of chat groups and stuff that we had going on.
There were a lot of different chat groups. A few of them were made for Pacific video grouplets, I would say, which allowed for people who were interested in doing that topic to discuss more in depth, which I thought was really good, because, you know, the main group chat can be a little bit intimidating. So allowing the smaller groups around those smaller topics was really great. And during the beginning, we had the youth advisor meetings before the videos were being created. And I found that the connections there were really bolstered by the connections that people had. Like, people, even if I wasn't known at that time, nobody else knew me, but I was still treated like a friend. And I'm not sure exactly how that environment was fostered, but it was an amazing one where it felt like, you know, you weren't the new kid on the sidelines. You were the one who was immediately picked up by the cool friend group.
And I remember how it was the discussion that we had about, how is this working? What's going on here? That helped inform the decision around going, well, when we do the videos, we should have people come together and have conversations, but we'll keep the groups to 5 or 6. We felt like, we don't know why, but that felt like a bit of a magic number. And another thing I've become obsessed with now is small group conversation, and where you can find vulnerability and humility in those kinds of spaces. And I think that was really valuable. Like, as soon as we gained more than that, it felt like information delivery thing rather than a chat. Does that make sense, Yuka? You know, you sometimes sat back and listened in those groups. You didn't necessarily always, you know, but does that make?
Sorry, could you repeat like the first part of the question? Sorry.
Having those small groups, the value of that, like when you were having those chats.
Like how were they? Wait.
Yeah, what was your experience of them?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I enjoyed them. Like even when, like the times that I didn't have much to share myself, I really liked listening. Just like sitting back and listening to other people speaking on, you know, a certain topic or issue, and then their own experiences with them, or like something they've seen on the internet. And just being able to see that and brainstorming for myself, or thinking about my own personal things without necessarily having to share them if I didn't feel like it, or if I didn't if I didn't think it was as applicable, or yeah. And I think that way, like in that sense, it also felt safe. Like I didn't feel pressured to speak or anything, and sometimes I didn't, but it was still okay. Like I still got to gain so much information for myself, enough for me to like make content or think about, you know, just think to myself about any ideas that I have. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions coming through in the chat that I've seen. Yeah. I think someone's asking about people being paid. All the young people involved in the project were paid at the similar rate. Basically, I think the creative advisors, we paid at $40 an hour and sort of set a sort of a core fee because they sort of had a bit of control over those hours, and the content creators all were paid $300 for 8 to 10 hours of their time to do the video creation, and the research participants are also paid for the workshops that they attended. So we covered all of that off, and that was factored into budgets. And I think that's really important. Like, it's really important to recognize, like, we couldn't get the experiences of the young people you see in front of you here, or of a 13-year-old young person that's from the, goes to school in the western suburbs and comes from a second generation migrant family. You just can't, like, that is what we are paying for, the value of that. You can't create that or get that any other way. So Jem has also asked about ethical considerations for producing the online material. For example, any risks are considered, and we really did. It's probably one that I can answer, or Lucy can chime in on as well, because I know she's pretty passionate about this, because Project Rocket have, developed a range of practices over time. But ultimately, that idea of getting the authenticity was about trusting young people and saying, you can veto this at any time. Like, even now, if a young person contacts us and says, I don't want that video up there anymore, we just take it down. So we give the control over to them in terms of the decision making around that. We had young people involved in the editing process, so they were making decisions around what should go in and what shouldn't go in. And a lot of that was about upfront information giving and all the rest of it, so that we were actually able to keep them informed about, what we were doing, where we were at, and being, creating a safe space to create the material. But then when it was being publicly shared, having some real careful consideration about what the editing process was, what that content was, and how we were going to share it.
All right, I might jump in there, folks. I'm conscious of time, and making sure we've got a little bit of time for people to do kind of announcements and the wrap up, and make sure we're away on time today. So I'll just wrap up this segment by saying thanks so much to the team at Project Rocket, to Dan and to Yuka, to Sunny, to Jess, to Lucy, and to Sneha, who got a number of mentions. It was really, really fantastic to hear about the kind of journey that you went on, the changes that you made, particularly related to the needs and input of young people. I think one of the things that really stood out to me personally was Jess talking about that balance of creating space for young people to lead and to own the project, but with the support and guidance and kind of mentoring, I guess, that was needed. I feel like there's a real kind of magic balance, and there's a very fine line to get that right. And it really sounds like it worked brilliantly well on this project. So really interested to see where you head to with the review, the evaluation, any kind of outcomes that you've got that you can share with us going forward. And yeah, really, really fantastic to have so many of the team here to talk about the project that you're obviously so passionate and proud of, as well you should be. Anybody that hasn't looked at the videos, I urge you to head to the website and check those out and think about whether they can be shared with the young people you're working with, because they are pretty flexible. It's designed for schools, but it's a super flexible platform, and the videos are very relatable and really short and sharp as well, and to the point.
So just on, and we are starting a pilot, and we are looking at piloting at schools, but if there is anyone here for whatever reason this resonates with you and you think within your youth service or within a program that these videos might work for you, give us a call. We might be able to involve you in the pilot and just at least evaluate a little bit of how you've used them and what that's been like. Or if you know any schools that might be interested, because you're a youth worker at a school or something like that, let us know. So we appreciate it.
Great. Thanks so much, folks. Finn, you can hit end record.